Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You have reached the No Name Cinema Society, the film review show that digs a little deeper, and this is our Sound Off. It's our free-form segment where we talk about all things related to the film industry and previous shows that we've done. It's a fun time. Hi, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzel. I'm one of your hosts. I'm here in Newtown, Pennsylvania for what I think will be the last time, or at least in the near future. I'm visiting some friends out here doing the show, and our Sound Off is our freeform segment. It was born when Davey, one of the original founders, felt like there wasn't, the individual reviews were a little too rigid, and he just wanted a room to talk. So, we have some segments, but essentially it's going to be a conversation between a few people, including one of my partners from the 1959 in review. Ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Taylor is back for tonight's Sound Off.
Hello.
Also, one of the newest members of the Society, live from the Mountain Time Zone, ladies and gentlemen, Matthew Polis is back.
Hi, Jonathan.
Welcome, welcome. And Matt, this is Patrick. Patrick, this is Matt. I can introduce you guys.
Hello.
Hello, sir.
Patrick is a quasi-famous composer, and Matt is a super talented sound designer. So, hopefully maybe even collaborations can be born of this situation here. So before we go any further, here is the schedule for this, our 60th series of episodes. Just this past Thursday, Matt was with us for our classic movie discussion of Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest from 1959. We'll see if that plays into tonight's discussion. And tonight, of course, the Sound Off, in which we're going to do a tweet beat. We're going to answer all your questions related to the finale episodes, the Oscar preview, the top 10, and also the 1959 review that Patrick's going to talk a little bit about. I'm going to do a What's Their Bucket, which is our segment spotlighting a character actor in film history. And also, Patrick and I will be counting down our top 5 films from 1959 related to that project that we did last year. Okay, so we call this the Tweet Beat. This is a segment where we answer a bunch of questions that you guys send in to us. Generally, we get a lot of questions relating to our finale episodes. In February, consecutive days, we had our top 10 of 2019. We had our Oscar preview for that year. And on February 6th, Patrick, James, and I did our 1959 in review. We're going to cover all that ground. One question that comes up every year is people are curious about the top 10s. What would happen if we had a composite top 10? So, of course, we had myself, Alex, and Jim did the top 10 this year. And if you combined all our top 10s, here is what it would look like. 1917 technically had the total most points, even though it was not anybody's number 1 film. It was number 3 on a couple lists. There are only 3 Best Picture nominees on this list. This is our composite top 10 for 2019, guys. And this is me, Jim, and Alex, our top 10s combined. Any thoughts on this list, gentlemen?
What strikes me is number 5, Captain Marvel, that it's on this list, and I believe it was top of another list that you made, or I was super surprised because I thought it was pretty mediocre.
I enjoyed it, and I named it Best Editing of the Year. Maybe that's what you're referring to. I really enjoyed it. I actually think it was really fun, and I really loved the twist halfway through. I thought that was almost Hitchcockian in a way, having just reviewed North by Northwest with you. I also thought it was very empowering, especially from a feminist point of view. I was really moved by it and excited by it, and I thought it was well made, so I thought it had a lot going on, a lot more than a lot of the other films I saw this year. Extra points for me when a movie comes across, has depth, but also has entertaining. I found Captain Marvel to be both. Have you seen Captain Marvel, Patrick?
Yeah, I hate the actress. I think she's wooden. I don't really like her as a character, but I can see how the editing.
She's an Oscar winner.
For a role where she was a victim. This one, she was supposed to be empowered, and I really don't like her in this role.
Interesting.
Another movie that I really didn't like was Harriet.
Yeah, I didn't like Harriet either. That was Alex's, he was beating the drum for Harriet. I thought it was really like movie of the week kind of stuff.
And the score was so bad, I couldn't even
I agree. I actually said that on our top 10 of, I guess you didn't watch that. I'm not a Harriet fan myself, but its presence on the list shows that I'm not manipulating these lists. This is not my list, it is a compilation. So there are some films on here that I don't particularly enjoy, but I am going to back up Captain Marvel and Brie Larson. I think she's terrific myself. Matt, have you seen Harriet?
No.
But 1917 is the one for me, and out of the Best Picture nominees, it was my favorite, and obviously it's the composite number 1 for this year's top 10. I don't suppose you saw 1917, Patrick?
No, I haven't yet, because I want to see it in the theaters.
It's a Patrick-y kind of movie.
I feel like I would have really enjoyed it. I don't know why I missed it. So I did see Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I liked it, but I was like, this movie, what is this about? I don't know. I watched it. It took me 3 sessions to get through it. Each time I was like, okay, something else is going to happen. Something else is going to happen. And nothing happened, but it was just fun to hang out with Brad Pitt.
That's sort of how I feel about the movie, and that's why I hate it. I will actively hate on Once Upon a... It's my least favorite Tarantino movie ever, and some think it's his masterpiece. I don't understand. I'm diverting from the Academy in a lot of different ways. It was Jim's #1 film of the year, but I actively disliked it. Matt, anything on Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I liked it a lot. It made me very happy for the first 30 minutes. I loved just being in that world. I liked a lot of the scenes and the characters, and the kind of didn't lose me towards the end, but I didn't love it as much. You know, the ending is big and surprising and disturbing, but that's just what happens in his movies. But I liked, you know, I'd say the first half a lot better. I was like totally into it. Made me smile in the first 20 minutes, just like being in there.
I felt that, but then it jumped the shark for me. Like maybe at the end of the first act, a 30-minute mark maybe is what you mentioned. So that's a good segue to our next slide, and this is a composite top 10. If you merge together all our top 10s, and now we've done 5: 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. So if you merge together all our top 10s, here is what it looks like. Not too much difference here. 3 2019 films join this list, knocking off 3 films from 2015 that were on last year. Spotlight, Mad Max, and Ex Machina are now off of this list, and that makes 2019 actually the most represented year on this list. Phantom Thread is still #1 overall. It is the only film ever to appear on all 3 lists, and that's why it's #1. It was no one's #1 film of 2017, however, but it appeared high on lots of lists. Widows is the only one of my #1 films to make this list. We have 1 Best Picture winner on this top 10 and 5 Best Picture nominees. I hate one of these films, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I dislike 2 of the others, again, proving it's not weighted towards me in any way. The films like Silence, 1917, Creed, Widows, and Honey Boy were only seen by 2 of the 3 members on the panel of those years, so theoretically they might even be higher once those people see those films. So guys, any thoughts on this particular list?
I'm pretty surprised that Phantom Thread's up there. Happy to see it. I love P.T. Anderson a lot. Wouldn't have guessed that it was top 10 of a composite list just because it didn't seem to resonate as much as some of his other things, but I'm glad to see it there.
It was my #3 film of 2017. I'm a big fan, but it was also other guys' #3s, and so, like, you know, just in terms of total points, it is the highest rated composite on the top 10. Again, the only one ever to appear in all 3 lists. Patrick, anything on this list here?
I also thought Moonlight was a masterpiece of a film. I walked in not knowing anything about it, and I was like completely riveted by this film. I thought it was great. I love the score. I love the acts. That to me was a wonderful film.
And Moonlight came up on our Decade in Review, so we talked about it not too long ago. It's one of the films that I don't like on this list, unfortunately. I don't hate it as much as I hate Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I would call it a good film, but I would also say it's highly overrated for me personally. I have some problems with some of the acting. I thought the fragmented structure was actually like hurt the momentum, and I thought technically it's disaster. The cinematography is awful to me. Like and Alex and I talked. Alex agrees with me on that because we made fun of it a little bit on the Decade in Review show.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah, a lot of
people be wanting more every act, and I know that might not be a good thing, but I wanted to live with the characters a little longer in each of the acts.
I don't disagree with that, but yeah, that I found that to be a failing. Matt Polis, do you want to be a tiebreaker on Moonlight before we move on?
I don't know. Well, I saw it, but I don't remember it well enough to go into depth. But I would side on Patrick's side.
Always people side against me. It's just the nature of the show. All right, so now one final list, because we did a very special thing in March, is George, Alex, and I did each of our top 10 films of the decade. And you would think there'd be some crossover between the top 10 films of the decade and that composite top 10 that I just showed you between 2015 and 2019, but not really. So here's the list. If you added up all of the 3 of our top 10s of the decade, here's the list, and it's a completely different list. Honey Boy is actually the only film that makes both of those lists, so I thought that was pretty interesting. Fury was the only film to be mentioned more than once on the 3 top 10s. It was my #1 and Alex's #8. On this list, there are 2 Best Picture winners and 4 Best Picture nominees. I haven't even seen Macbeth, but hope to once I get back to LA. On this list, 2014, 2017, and 2019 are represented twice. 2010, 2012, and 2018 are not represented at all. The year that came up most in the show between all 3 top 10s was 2015, but that's only represented on this top 10 by MACBETH, which is the film directed by Justin Kurzel and featuring Michael Fassbender and Marianne Cotillard. When Patrick saw the Decade Top 10, he had some issues with me as far as Captain Phillips was concerned. So you want to start there?
Well, it's just selfish. Captain Phillips came out right after a film that I've scored about the same subject matter.
Right. Somali.
Huge star named Tom Hanks.
Fishing Without Nets is the name of the movie you scored, right?
Fishing Without Nets. They didn't rip off the concept, but they ripped off the concept. But, you know, it's fine.
Except that Captain Phillips was a real event that they told the story of.
Our story was based on real events, too. It was. It's so different.
I know. I'm saying, but it's different. It's different real events. Though.
It's different. There's a captain. Ours had a captain. His had a captain. There's a white guy. There's a black guy. I mean, come on. But I did watch Boyhood at Sundance that same year, and I thought that was from what I remember about it, it was a great film.
It didn't make my top 10 of the decade, but it would make a top 100, certainly maybe top 50. I like it a lot, and that's why it's on this composite top 10. Matt Polis, anything on this list?
I love Boyhood as well. I really loved it at the time. I don't think I've watched it twice, but I think it's one of the films that stayed with me because I remember it just really having an impact, both in terms of the film itself and then the process that went through the production of it and how that resonated. It wasn't just, oh, that's a cool behind the scenes thing, which it was. It informed the film. The film became that thing, and it was self-evident within it, and it just worked on every level. I think he was super successful with that film. In general, I'm surprised this list because it's the same list as the last one, except that it includes 5 additional years on the front end. That it's not more weighted towards 2010 to 15. It's like not at all.
It's not the same list in theory. I mean, like the first list, the 25, 15 through 19, is combining all the top 10s that we've done on this show, and then this list is just combining our all-decade lists. I mean, A, there's some different people in the mix. And B, people reevaluated some films, as things change. I mean, certainly the number one that I had in 2016 is different now. I've made some switches myself. Rewatching some of them, I made some moves. So I'm surprised that there is as much difference between the two lists as there are, but they were tabulated differently. Like they are different things.
Can you remind me what Fury is? I don't recall that.
I thank you for asking. It was my number one film of the decade. Fury is a World War II film about a tank crew led by Brad Pitt. Also featuring Shia LaBeouf and Michael Pena and John Bernthal and Logan Lerman. It's a masterpiece as far as I'm concerned from director David Ayer. It beautifully captures the giving up of one's soul in order to face the horrors of war and how one character tries to hold on to his humanity in this awful time towards the end of World War II. It's so well done, Matt. I highly, obviously recommend it. And Alex did as well. It was on his list of best of the decade. That's why it's number one here.
I saw Fury. I couldn't remember it, but I did see it, and I remember enjoying it. I don't know if it'll be in my tops, but it's a great war movie.
Yeah, I've yet to find someone say they didn't like it, but I have found lots of people that have said they have not seen it. Okay, so now we're going to shift gears and talk about the Oscar preview, because you guys are always wanting to know how many Oscar predictions did we get right. For me personally, I was 5 for 9 in 2018, 9 for 9 in 2017, and 8 for 9 in 2016, missing only Best Picture, which I almost got because it eventually went to Moonlight, but I did pick La La Land. Almost went 9 for 9 that year. I still want to recount. So on the main show that we did, the Oscar preview, Devin went 5 for 9. George went 7 for 9 of this year's Oscars in 2019. I went 5 for 9. But if you look at the comments in the Oscar preview, the day before the Oscars, I changed my votes on both of the screenplay categories. So if you, the audience, are willing to count that, then I also went 7 for 9. To tie George in terms of our predictions. The category we all missed was Best Director. We all said Sam Mendes was going to win for 1917, and of course it went to Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. Devin and I both missed Best Picture. George predicted that correctly, and George did not change his vote for Adapted Screenplay the way I did, and that's the other one he missed. I was the only one to attempt the other craft categories, in which I got 7 of the 8 right. The only one I missed was Costume Design, and the film that I said actually should win did, and that was Little Women. I helped the film win his Oscar pool, getting 20 out of the 24 total, and out of the ones I predicted on the show and in the comment section, I got 14 out of 17 right, which isn't too terrible. Guys, did you guys do any Oscar pools?
No.
I was just trying to watch them all, and I did pretty well, I think.
I am pleased to announce that this was a special year because Patrick actually showed up at our Oscar party this year and then did an Irish exit, but he did show up.
Yes, I did, and I did do an Irish exit, but not because of the company. It was a great event.
Oh, thanks for saying that. Matt Poulos has been to Oscar parties in the past in New York.
Do you remember? I don't know if it's the last one I came to, but it was one of the most memorable ones because do you remember I had like a newborn?
Brought your baby, yeah. That was the last one in New York.
So probably was my last one. And I remember it because I got, we were new parents and I think she was like, I don't know, a few months old. And we were still under the impression that you could just live your life as normal and bring your kid around. Like an Oscar party, it ended at midnight. And I remember distinctly because we got yelled at by probably one of your guests or maybe some other person at the bar, but it was an older lady. And she was like giving me, attitude about having brought my few-month-old baby to an Oscar party. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Okay, cool. Now I'm going to shift focus to you guys. And I didn't tell you guys this was coming because I wanted to sort of be a surprise. But the audience would like to know, because they've seen my top 10, they've seen Jim's and Alex's, they've heard Devin and George from the Oscar preview. They would like to know what your guys' thoughts, some of your favorite films from 2019 are.
You gotta give me some preparation on that one, man.
I mean, you don't know your favorite films from the year that just happened? Just name one film that you liked. I don't care.
One film that I liked. I don't know. Come back to me.
Wow. I thought this would be a lot easier. My guess is Ford versus Ferrari you enjoyed very much, Matt.
I did like it. Yeah, it's exactly my kind of movie. But I'm kind of surprised it was a Best Picture type of thing, but it was a good movie.
Oh, yeah. I loved Joker. I thought the Joker was phenomenal. And if you say anything bad about the Joker, I mean, you're just a liar.
Wow. I think the Joker is like my 15th favorite of the year out of 105, so that's not too bad.
What's your favorite of the year?
Maybe you should watch our freaking top 10 and figure it out.
The audience wants to know now, you know?
The audience has already watched the top 10. Man. You need to do your homework.
Oh, but Knives Out, what was that, 20 or 19?
That was 19. That was 19.
Oh, I saw it in 20. That's why I didn't know. That was an excellent movie.
Devin loved it as well. He came up in the Oscar preview. He felt like it should have won original screenplay. He also felt like Ana de Armas should have been a Best Actress nominee. And that's where I disagree with him. She's gorgeous, but I don't think she was very good. All right, so now, guys, we're going to segue to talking about our 1959 interview. So Patrick will have a little more to say about this stuff because there's some questions that the audience has related to that. So Patrick, the audience would like to know what you felt was the worst film of 1959 that you saw.
The worst film of 1959. I think, oh man, there was a couple of bad ones. Hold on, let me. You
want to look up your list?
Yeah, my list. I think, as much as I enjoyed like the weirdness of Shadows, I finished the movie. I was like, what the hell did I just watch? Shadows was a little weird. I also just didn't like Some Like It Hot. It was too hokey. I know people love that film. I didn't like that one. Those are the ones that I really didn't like.
So Some Like It Hot, you're going to get some heat on the comment section on that one. But
I'm sure I will. It just didn't do it for me. That was actually the first film that I watched. Probably wasn't in the pacing, the world, as much as I was by the time I watched Room at the Top.
Some Like It Hot, I do feel like is maybe a little overrated. I do like it and appreciate it, I think is the important thing. Certainly Wilder's direction. Matt, have you seen Some Like It Hot? It's considered the greatest comedy of all time.
Live.
Oh, yeah. I have seen it. I remember a high school film class teacher couldn't stop talking about it, which made me probably less impressed when I finally saw it.
I wonder if Patrick saw my worst film of 1959. It doesn't sound like you did. It's called The FBI Story, and it covers the evolution of the FBI through a fictional agent played by Jimmy Stewart. It depicts some episodes from the case files of the Bureau spanning decades, and it turned out to be a shameful, unadulterated piece of propaganda from director Mervyn LeRoy. It's basically a commercial training video for the FBI with a family melodrama shoved in the way I shove clothes in a suitcase. The script is terrible, fragmented with an over-reliance on voiceover. Jimmy Stewart, Vera Miles, and Mary Hamilton are forced to play archetypes, and I don't care about any of them. I rarely say this about a film, but this is a film that should never have been made. A terrible concept, executed poorly. Has anybody ever seen The FBI Story?
No.
Sorry.
It's fine. It's bad. At least I thought it was, and we'll see if the audience agrees with me. That was the worst film I saw. Out of the, I think I saw 76 films from 1959, and that was the worst one. So Patrick, the next question is kind of a fun one. Who was the hottest man and woman you saw in films from 1959? And my guess is they might come from the same movie for you.
I mean,
start with the hottest man.
The hottest man. What the fuck, man?
You can do it.
Really, I love the leading guy from North by Northwest.
Cary Grant.
He's a sex symbol, man. He's like that older guy that you want to be when you're older. I mean, you know,
Patrick wants to be Cary Grant.
He's kind of like my archetype. He's a good-looking man. You know?
And I mean, Matt, you just reviewed North by Northwest. How do you feel about Cary Grant?
Like a George Clooney. He's like, who doesn't like him?
Exactly. He's a George Clooney. He's definitely a George Clooney.
So my hottest guy actually comes from a movie that you liked a lot. It comes from your friend, the Legend of Tom Dooley. I've got Tom Dooley himself, Michael Landon, as what I thought was probably the most attractive male I saw in a film of 1959.
If we're going this route, which I feel like we are, his co-star. That's a good-looking guy. Yo, that movie was filled with just like hot guys.
I've got Patrick on tape now saying this movie was filled with hot guys.
We're just like teens playing like Confederate soldiers, and you just didn't care that they were Confederate soldiers because they were so cool looking.
He's referring to Richard Rust, who plays Country Boy. Is that his character?
Country Boy. I love Country Boy. Yo, Country Boy was the man.
But yeah, I thought Michael Landon was probably a pretty good-looking guy. All right, so Patrick, you might enjoy this one a little more. Hottest girl from 1950. You saw in a movie.
I don't know her name, but you know who I'm talking about.
You go on Simone Signoret and Room at the Top.
Oh man! Listen, I'm on the older side of the spectrum with all my hotness. 1959. Whoo! She was a steamer in that one, man. I tell you. And I had to look back and see if she was a steamer back in the day too. She was really a beautiful woman who also is an amazing actress. I should watch more of her films. She gives off a lot of sex appeal.
I missed the name.
Simone Signoret, who actually won the Oscar for Best Actress in 1959 for a film called Room at the Top, which Patrick was a big fan of, and we'll see if that comes up again tonight. I knew this was coming. She's a gorgeous woman. She is a good actress. I like her better in some of her French films. Certainly for 1959, she's very sensual in this movie, which is very different from a lot of the other films of the era.
And her accent. She has a French accent. I mean, who else?
Well, I've got somebody else. My hottest actress of the year is someone that Matt will have seen, but not in a movie from 1959 probably. She's probably best known for her work on Gilligan's Island. Ginger on Gilligan's Island. Tina Louise is her name, and she was in 3 films in 1959. One that Patrick saw called Day of the Outlaw, and a film called The Trap, and also a film called The Hangman. Matt Polis is familiar with my affinity for redheads. Pre-Gilligan's Island, Tina Louise is stunning, even in black and white. I mean, just gorgeous. She just made me weak in the knees. I thought she was beautiful in these films from 1959. Patrick, do you remember her in Day of the Outlaw?
I do, and you know, a lot of that. I think she looked great. You know, she didn't have a French accent. Maybe if she had, she would have gotten my vote. I don't know.
The accent goes a long way. Matt, do you remember Ginger from Gilligan's Island?
Sure, but just imagine if Peter Jackson got a hold of that film and he could colorize it for you. You'd go nuts.
Exactly. Okay, next question is, the audience would like to know, and I didn't tell you this was coming on purpose, because they want to know if any of my tidbits or factoids from the 1959 in review stuck with you. Anything that I said in terms of like a tidbit or a factoid, what is the one that you remember the most from doing that episode with me?
No, I think our conversation about race stood out, but none of the tidbits.
Yeah.
Like I think the conversation about race, where the reason why there were so few black roles, they were trying to not have blacks just be in servant roles, which kind of made it so there's just no roles now for black people, because what else are black people? People didn't want to even put black people in their films at all, because they would have to take it out for the South, and they would have to change the movie around, so they didn't even want to touch it. Interesting factoid.
That qualifies. Do you find that interesting, Matt?
Yeah.
A new question that I thought was interesting. On the 1959 review, and again on Thursday, I compared North by Northwest to Jumanji. Go back to those episodes to see why. I'm not going to get into it now. And I suggested that they would be a good double feature. And so the question that came back was, what are other interesting double features between 1959 films and modern films? And I thought, oh, that's an interesting thing to tackle. So I came up with maybe like 10 or so possible double features, and we'll see. Patrick maybe has seen some of these films, but we'll see what these guys think about some double features, for 1959 that I'm recommending to you guys that you might want to try. We've already talked about North by Northwest and Jumanji. I think that would be a great double feature, super fun. There was a film that is that was my number 3 film of the decade, called The Foreigner from 2017, and it was about an IRA terrorist attack and how that affected the lives of character played by Jackie Chan, character played by Pierce Brosnan, etc. Patrick, I'm curious if you can think of a 1959 film that might relate to IRA-related activity.
Oh, that's the one about the IRA, the bombings and stuff.
Patrick's not so good with titles.
I'm not good with titles at all. I have to look at my...
It's fine. I'll bail you out. It's called Shake Hands with the Devil. Both films have to do with the concept of what's more important, nationalism or peace. And so The Foreigner from 2017 and Shake Hands with the Devil from 1959, I think would be a terrific IRA-related double feature. Another one, there's a film called A Hole in the Head from 1959, which won the Oscar for Best Song. Those of you know the song High Hopes. Features Frank Sinatra as a single parent. And I think it would be a terrific double feature with the film Honey Boy. For those of you that have seen Honey Boy with Shia LaBeouf, in which he plays his own father, that I think would be a nice double feature because both films are about the challenges of single parenthood, drawing a line between similar problems that people in 1959 are having and people in modern day are having as regards raising children on their own. 400 Blows I have as a potential double feature with Jonah Hill's film Mid-90s from 2018. It's certainly related to the frustrations of adolescence. And again, similar themes, to kids in 1959 versus kids in the mid-90s. Of course, the film came out in 2018. Has anybody seen mid-90s?
No. I remember the ad campaign, but I haven't seen it.
Even from the ad campaign, you can see that might be a good double feature. You've seen the 400 Blows.
Yeah, definitely.
Another potential double feature is 1959, there's a film called The Mouse That Roared with Peter Sellers playing 3 different roles, which is a biting political satire. And it made me think of the film The Death of Stalin, which came out in 2018 as well. They would be a fun political satire double feature. Gidget, which came out in 1959, starring Sandra Dee, I think would be a nice double feature with Booksmart that came out this past year, directed by Olivia Wilde, dealing with young women trying to find themselves in the modern day dating and high school scene, and I think there's some connections there. The Diary of Anne Frank, I think would be a really good double feature with Jojo Rabbit. We can call it the Jews in the Attic double feature. There's a very little seen movie, and Patrick didn't see this one because it was unavailable anywhere, except it was on TCM, so Devin taped it for me, and Alex and I went over to his house to watch it. It's called The Last Angry Man. It was the Best Actor nominee for actor Paul Muni. And thinking about it, I think it would be a great double feature with the movie that came out last year called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, in which Tom Hanks plays Fred Rogers. Both films feature a friendship between an older, well-known personality and a youngish media person, whether it's a reporter or, in the case of The Last Angry Man, a TV producer. And both films also are ultimately about goodness and the power of goodness. So I think it would be a great double feature in that regard. From a musical biopic point of view, Rocket Man from last year would be a great double feature with The Five Pennies, which is about famous cornet player Red Nichols, played by Danny Kaye. I don't suppose you saw The Five Pennies. I don't think you did, Patrick.
No.
The Aftermath, which came out last year from director James Kent, starring Keira Knightley and Alexander Skarsgård. That might be a really good double feature with Hiroshima Mon Amour from director Alan Renee, certainly as it relates to forbidden love. I did want to see if I can find a companion for Room at the Top, since you're such a fan, Patrick. I'm cheating a little bit. I didn't pick a film from the 2010s, but I did pick a film from 1990, which is a different year that we studied. There's a film called White Palace with Susan Sarandon and James Spader, which is also very similarly a May-December romance, a very hot late May-December romance, and also related to classism and economic issues. And so I think Room at the Top and White Palace would be a terrific double feature. I don't suppose you've seen White Palace with Susan Sarandon.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing and just about as hot as Simone Signoret is in Room at the Top. Have you seen White Palace by chance?
No.
And so, Patrick, the question that I would have for you is, do you yourself, I mentioned this is coming, did you think of any good double features with the 1959 film and a recent film?
Well, maybe Ben-Hur and, something like a Gladiator. You'll be like 100 years older after watching those movies. There's no way you'll sit through them all without going to the bathroom 4 times.
I thought you were going to say Ben-Hur with the 2016 remake of Ben-Hur.
No. Gladiator is probably one of my favorite movies of all time, and I thought the action sequences in Ben-Hur were amazing. I think they could pair well. All
right, guys, I'm going to move on from the double feature section. You guys good?
I think you've hit upon something, Jonathan. You're like the becoming the sommelier of movies with these pairings, and you could sort of give it a suggestion for a double feature around a theme or a personality of who's watching it. I think you're getting on something here.
I like that. I like being a sommelier of movies. I'm going to start putting that in my business card. Okay, so the other thing that we do in these tweet meets is you guys are interested in crossovers. And by crossovers, I mean overlap. We studied all these years on the show. in our big reviews. I mean, we've studied 1990 at this point, 1988, 1942, 1959, and 1966. I've studied all those movies intensely. And so there's always interested in like actors and directors that have appeared in multiple years like that in the films that we think. So obviously there's a plenty of overlap in directors and actors between 1959 and 1966. And there's also a great deal of overlap in actors and directors between 1942 and 1959. I thought it would be more interesting to look at overlap and people that worked in last year's study, 1988, and the study that we just did, 1959. So the following are actors and directors that have appeared or worked on films from both 1959 that we studied and 1988. And we're going to start with director Blake Edwards, who did Operation Petticoat in 1959, which is a film that Patrick watched. In 1988, he directed a film called Sunset with Bruce Willis and James Garner. The film actually won him a Razzie for Worst Director of 1988, but he did work in 1988.
Like 2 years old? Like, how old was he?
He was young when he did Operation Petticoat. Another director working both years is Sidney Lumet, who did The Fugitive Kind in 1959. I named it. It should have won Best Actor and Best Supporting Actress for Marlon Brando and Joanne Woodward, respectively. In 1988, he directed the film Running on Empty, a film that both Devin and George singled out as one of their favorites from 1988. And so those are the two actors that have worked on both 1959 and 1988. Sean Connery, of course, made his debut in 1959 in Disney's Darby O'Gill and the Little People. In 1988, he would be in the film The Presidio with Mark Harmon and Meg Ryan. Alec Guinness was Oscar nominated in 1988 for Best Supporting Actor for his work in Little Dorrit. In 1959, he would be in the film Our Man in Havana, based on a story by Graham Greene. Dean Stockwell, which many of you know from his work in TV's Quantum Leap, was also Oscar nominated in 1988 for his work on Married to the Mob. And he was also in a film in 1959 that came up in the show called Compulsion. Also Oscar nominated in 1988 was Martin Landau for Tucker the Man in His Dream. And as Matty P here has learned, Martin Landau appeared in what film in 1959?
North by
Northwest. Yeah, he played Leonard in North by Northwest. The recently departed Max von Sydow appeared in 1988, also Oscar nominated, but for Best Actor for Pele the Conqueror. And in 1959, he plays a small role in Wild Strawberries from his friend Ingmar Bergman. And of course, I also named him as Best Actor in 1966 for his work on Hawaii. One actress has appeared in 4 of the 5 years that we've studied. She's appeared in films in 1959, 66, 88, and 90. Do you guys want to guess who would have such a long career?
Katharine Hepburn.
Not Katharine Hepburn. She would have passed on by, she was done movies by, I think her last movie was 82, 83, or something like that. But no, it's a woman. Shirley MacLaine was in all 4 of these years. In 1959, Patrick, you'll remember she was in Career. In 1966, she was in the movie Gambit with Michael Caine. 1988, she was a Golden Globe nominee for the film Madame Susatska. And in 1990, she should have won the Oscar, wasn't even nominated for Best Supporting Actress for her work in Postcards from the Edge from director Mike Nichols. That's a pretty amazing career if you think about it for Shirley MacLaine, and she's still kicking.
It's crazy.
All right, guys, anything on those crossovers before we move on to the next segment?
No.
It's time for What's Their Bucket? The title is what Society member Jim Carroll says when you can't remember someone's name. And true to form, the actors and actresses that we spotlight in this segment tend to be those on-screen presences that we often see but don't know by name. And for Patrick, that's just about everybody.
That guy.
So it's the character actors, those that have made a career of small but important and memorable roles in film. And so far, we've tended to spotlight actors who stood out or surprised me from one of the years we've studied. This is the 4th time we've done it, and so far we've spotlighted actress Cecil Kellaway from 1942, and that was in episode 50.4. And then in episode 52.4, we spotlighted Agnes Moorehead, also highlighted in our year 1942. And the most recent time we did it was episode 57.4, which I believe is episode Matt watched, in which we spotlighted actor M. Emmett Walsh. Mm-hmm. And Patrick was on that show as well, so he's used to this segment. So it stands to reason that I would look at an actor, in this case a female actor, who stood out to me from our 1959 in review. And tonight's lesser-known actress appeared in 4 films from our 1959 in review. A film called The Man in the Net with Alan Ladd. She appeared in A Hole in the Head, which I mentioned a few minutes ago with Frank Sinatra. She appeared in Last Train from Gun Hill with Kirk Douglas. And one of Patrick's favorites, she appeared in Career. I'm referring to actress Carolyn Jones, the unique and lovely actress. And Patrick, do you remember who she was in Career?
I am looking her up right now.
Well, I'll just tell you in the interest of time. She plays his agent who was secretly in love with him.
Yeah. She's a good bit role.
She's a good bit role, and she's a much bigger role than some of these other movies. And she was so good in all 4 roles that I saw in 1959 that I felt she could have been Oscar nominated for either her work in Career or Last Train in Gun Hill. Ultimately, I decided it was that latter film, Last Train from Gun Hill, that was the best work in a tremendous year for her. In the film, she plays Anthony Quinn's woman, who finds herself feeling sympathetic towards his ex-friend and now foe, Kirk Douglas. She carries her character's history with her as she slowly builds up the courage to betray her lover because it's on the side of right. So she eschews her checkered past in favor of the light. She plays very different characters in all 4 films and shines in all of them with a presence, personality, energy, and vitality that steals almost every scene that she's in. Carolyn Jones was born in Amarillo, Texas in 1930. Her barber father abandoned the family when she was 4, leaving just her sister, and her mother to make do. Jones had severe asthma as a child, and so she couldn't go out and play much with the other children. And so she buried herself in Hollywood fan magazines and dreamed of becoming a Hollywood starlet. At age 17, she moved to Pasadena thanks to a loan from her grandfather, where she enrolled in the classes they had at the Pasadena Playhouse. At the Pasadena Playhouse, she was spotted by a talent scout and signed to Paramount Pictures. She made her debut in 1952 in a small role in the noir The Turning Point. Shortly thereafter, she met an aspiring filmmaker that she would marry by the name of Aaron Spelling. With that said, she is not Tori's mother. That would be a later wife for Spelling that would give birth to the 90210 actress. It was that year that Jones was supposedly cast in one of the big productions of the year, From Here to Eternity. She was to play the prostitute Lorraine that falls in love with Montgomery Clift's character. However, Jones got pneumonia. Coupled with her asthmatic history, she was worried she was on death's door and had to pull out. Donna Reed was recast in the role and would win an Oscar for it. That's how close Carolyn Jones came to superstardom, just missing out on that pretty famous role. After she recovered, she kicked around TV for a while, still a very new medium at the time. She did an arc on Dragnet. She appeared on Alfred Hitchcock Presents. She even got an Emmy nomination for playing quintuplets in an episode of a show called Burke's Law. But she would take a chance on a role in a low-budget B-movie that would give her a second chance at real stardom. No one could have predicted the success of the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers in 1956, in which Jones plays Teddy Belichick, one of the 4 main characters who discovered the plot of the Pod People. The same role would be played by Veronica Cartwright in the 1978 remake. And so now Jones was on the path once again. Later that same year, Hitchcock cast her in The Man Who Knew Too Much. The very next year, she would receive an Oscar nomination for Best Supporting Actress for a film called The Bachelor Party, in which she played a lonely party girl. That film, unfortunately, doesn't seem to be available anywhere. She would win a Golden Globe that year as Best Newcomer for The Bachelor Party and also the Elvis Presley film King Creole. In 1958, she landed a plum role as Natalie Wood's best friend in the melodrama Marjorie Morningstar. And we've already talked about her huge success in 1959. Her last major film was How the West Was Won in 1963, in which she appeared alongside almost everyone else in Hollywood. With Jones getting typecast as the best friend or the wild wife, she opted to go back to TV to score a lead role. And the result would be the role she is perhaps best known for. Do you guys know what TV role that I'm talking about that she's best known for?
Addams Family?
Oh, somebody looked it up. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, in 1964, Carolyn Jones would put on a black wig to create the iconic role of Morticia Addams, a role later played by Angelica Houston in the films and Demi Moore on stage, understudied, incidentally, by my ex-girlfriend, Becca Ayers. After 64 episodes of The Addams Family, Jones would move on, but she would keep acting with small-ish roles in both TV and film. One notable late career role was as Diana's mother in the TV show version of Wonder Woman. She would continue acting even after being diagnosed with colon cancer in 1982, doing most of her scenes in a wheelchair for the short-lived daytime soap opera Capital on CBS. She died on August 3rd, 1983, at the very young age of 53. She's buried at Melrose Abbey Memorial Park in Anaheim, so maybe next time Patrick and I go to an Angels game, we'll stop by her cemetery and pay her a visit. It looks like we're not going to do that.
I don't know. Kind of weird, dude.
All right, guys. So that is What's Their Bucket. That's my spotlight on Carolyn Jones. What do you guys think?
Very well written, Jonathan. I think you're getting another little subgenre of your film empire.
Patrick, you saw her in Career.
Yeah, you know, it's always nice. I think it's great that you're doing this, like, just to give people who shine in roles but you don't know their names a chance to be to be highlighted. That's great. I mean, I think she did wonderful work in the movies that I've seen. So I think it's great that you're highlighting her.
And I watched The Man in the Net and Marjorie Morningstar this week just to prepare for night, and she's so good in those movies, and it's amazing to me. I mean, I guess Morticia Addams is sort of an important contribution, but I feel like she could have been a bigger movie star, and she definitely is a memorable presence to me on screen. Okay, it's time for the moment that Patrick has been waiting for, and maybe a lot of you as well. It's time for the top 5 films from 1959. We always do this, the first sound-off every year. When we do the 1959 review, it's mainly based on the Oscar categories. So now we're actually going to count down our top 5 favorite films of the year. Patrick, of course, will join me. If you watch the 1959 in review, you probably know what our number 1s and number 2s are, or have decent guesses. But the other films are going to be very worthwhile as well. So Patrick, you're going to start with your number 5 film of 1959.
Number 5 film, A Nun's Story. I thought it was a peek into a world that I had no idea about. I honestly didn't know the process to become a nun and their ability to show you why someone would want to go into this life. I mean, it was just illuminating. I think the story had a little bit of problems, and I don't think they needed to be so long-winded with the Africa side of it, but I did enjoy the film.
I have some issues with Nun's Story, as I mentioned in the 1959 review. You hit on one of them. It's extremely dull to me. I actually find it pretty boring, and I actually feel like it missed opportunities, because you talked about the Africa section. They missed the opportunity to deal with some of the hypocrisy of the religion as relates to colonization. You know, something like a film Hawaii did in 1966, and one of the reasons I liked Hawaii so much. The opportunity was there, and it wasn't really touched upon. I also, as gorgeous as Audrey Hepburn is, I don't love her in this film. I like the nuns a lot. You talked about Dean Edith Evans on the 1959 review. She's pretty terrific. I actually like Peter Finch a lot. Most famous for Network. I'm mad as hell. I'm not going to take it anymore. But he's great in The Nun Story as well. And the cinematography is really good. I thought the score was weird. As a composer, Franz Wackenman's score I thought was a little strange. Sometimes too heavy-handed and other times non-existent, when I feel like the film could have used a little extra something. It was uneven to me, The Nun Story, and boring.
Any movie that shows me a subject matter that I've never seen and that I'm interested in seeing about. I want to know why anyone would want to become a nun, what that process entails, and I felt like I learned something. And I don't even know if it's true or not, but it was more of a documentary for me.
It was based on memoir. It's certainly the truth from that one woman's perspective. Matt, I don't suppose you've ever seen Nun Story from director Fred Zinnemann.
Nope.
It was a long shot. My number 5 is a film that Patrick watched, and it was the big surprise of the project for me. A movie I had never heard of that wound up touching my soul in unexpected ways. And it's a film that Patrick wanted to remake and modernize. And it's a film that we both named its lead. It should have been nominated for Best Actress of 1959. Tell them what film it is, Patrick.
Tiger Bay.
Tiger Bay.
And I don't know names of movies, and I remember that one. That's a good movie. It's not in my top 5, but I did really enjoy it. It
was a very special film. In this film, Haley Mills and Horst Buchholz, as inadvertent murderer, form a bond over being outcasts, whether by age or nationality or just by being different. For a brief period of time, they find a few hours of relief and perhaps even happiness as they try to stave off fate in favor of the little bubble they create for themselves. It's a truly beautiful, memorable, unexpected film. If I were a one-man Oscar-nominating committee, I would give it 3 nominations: Best Picture, Best Actress, and Best Director for J. Lee Thompson. I look forward to recasting it with James on our next sound-off, because Patrick wanted to remake it in the modern age. I highly recommend it to all of you out there, because it's one I hadn't heard of, and it really, really shone through. I don't suppose there's any chance you've seen Tiger Bay, Matt?
No, but I should.
Yeah, Patrick, it really should. The lead actor is horrible, but the girl is like just carrying this movie. I've never seen a girl that young carry a whole movie on her back. It's pretty amazing.
And then she would go on to be Disney's princess of the 60s in films like Pollyanna and That Darn Cat and The Parent Trap. You might have seen The Parent Trap. All right, so Patrick, it's time for our number 4 film from 1959.
Number 4, we talked about this one, is Ben-Hur. This was a movie. This was an experience. This was filmmaking at its grandest. I did watch another film that tried to do something similar called Hannibal, and it failed. So that made me love this movie so much more. The action sequence, I could take those scenes and put them in a movie right now and still feel like, wow, this thing is happening. I wouldn't say it's my favorite, but there's aspects of the film that I'm like, this is Hollywood. There was nothing that I watched from 1959 that it was at all even close to as ambitious as this film.
I can agree with that, and we can also agree with you about Hannibal.
Oh my God.
But we argued about Ben-Hur at length on the 1959 review. To encapsulate that by saying the over-reverence to Christianity was a bump for me. There's a lot more themes going on. And at times it felt a little overblown, almost too big for its own good, losing some of the thread of the narrative in its effort to be as ambitious in scope as it was. That's what holds Ben-Hur back for me, although seeing it on the big screen at the old Ziegfeld Theater years ago was a tremendous experience. Matt, Ben-Hur's a movie that you may have seen.
Yeah, but not recently enough to comment on it. But yeah, definitely a big spectacle movie. There was one earlier too, right?
Yeah, there was a silent film in 1928, I think it was, from Cecil B. DeMille. Maybe even earlier, maybe 23 or 24. It's 24. I'm pretty sure it's 24. So Cecil B. DeMille did a silent version in the 20s. And this was a remake of that because MGM was running out of money and they needed to recycle stuff. And they came up with Ben-Hur and they made a lot of money. All right, my number 4 film of 1959 is a film that does come up already tonight in the double feature. And I also mentioned that Patrick said it should have been nominated for Best Director. Talking about the 400 Blows from Francois Truffaut, I don't think I'm understating it when I call the 400 Blows one of the most important, influential films of all time. And I'm not sure any film has captured the frustrations of childhood and the hypocrisy of adults as vividly as this film. 400 Blows stood out to me in college for its austere naturalism, the time it took to allow moments to breathe, like allowing Antoine to drink a whole bottle of milk. It may not seem like it's moving the story forward, but it's offering character detail and highlighting the desperation of the character. Through the film, director Francois Truffaut forced the world to look at cinema differently, in a way that he had been unable to accomplish through his writings in the Cahiers du Cinema. The dissatisfaction of the youth in the film is an eerie predictor to the civil unrest that would explode upon the country in the late 60s when these characters would have been in their late teens and early 20s. Very few films feel as honest and real as the 400 Blows still does, and that's true in any language. For our one-man Oscar nomination committee, we would have 2 nominations, Best Picture and also Best International Film. So the 400 Blows is a film that you seem to enjoy, Patrick.
Yeah, anybody that can make children give off believable performances and have so many children cast. They had schoolrooms of children. I just picture like a director herding cats. The director did a really, really good job. I thought it was a great film. Truly great film.
Matt Polis, have you seen 400 Blows in college?
Yeah, I like what you're saying about having room to breathe and like watching milk being drank. I look for that in movies all the time. It's one of my favorite traits of a movie, where there's time being witnessed without necessarily cutting away or having to stuff it full of other things. It's relatively rare, and some people don't love it. Like one that comes to mind recently is Roma. Love that movie. Love the opening 6 minutes of tile on the floor. I did. Not think it's fantastic, but a lot of people shut off by the end of that sequence. So I like what you're saying about the room to breathe.
Yeah, 400 Blows is special. Patrick, you might find this tidbit interesting. There are 3 sequels to 400 Blows.
With the same kids?
With the same main kid.
Oh, really?
Almost like Boyhood that Matt brought up earlier.
Oh, wow.
He in 3 other films, he sort of follows him into early adulthood with the same actor.
Does he get better or does he get worse?
I mean, 400 Blows is considered his masterpiece. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, hard. That would be hard. But I mean, he did a phenomenal job, so I can see why he'd want to recreate the magic.
Well, I mean, 400 Blows is autobiographical. Like that was Truffaut's childhood. Like at least that's the story, apocryphal or not. Okay, time for number 3. Patrick, your number 3 film of 1959.
My number 3 film, this is tough. I would love to put it higher, but I enjoyed the other films more, is Diary of Anne Frank. Just watching the film, what they did with one room, how they made tension happen, how they gave space, how they gave characters room, but it felt claustrophobic, but not too claustrophobic. I just thought the performances in there, like the smaller roles, were phenomenal. I really enjoyed it.
Well, this will be easy because my number 3 film is also Diary of Anne Frank. And I first saw the film a few years ago at Film Forum before I knew I was going to be doing this 1959 review. I loved the Diary of Anne Frank that night, and it's stuck with me ever since. I even named it number 3 in my top 5 adaptations of Pulitzer Prize winners in episode 52.4. But after watching it again, I think it ought to be number 2, jumping ahead of The Grapes of Wrath. I enjoyed it that much. It's a highly emotional, beautifully executed film that is simultaneously soul-crushing, but also life-affirming, partially making us appreciate all that we have, but also Anne's positivity and hope for the future as a call to arms for the future generations to make a better world, because we can. And that message has rung truer than ever in 2020. Director George Stevens handles this material so delicately, never forcing emotions. It all happens so naturally. And in spite of all the sadness, he also finds joy, hope, and romance amidst the fear and the tension. It's an emotional roller coaster in the best possible way. And actually, I have this word claustrophobia in here as well. Its frames are full and deep, adding to the feeling of claustrophobia. The scene work is gorgeous and honest and natural. It came up a lot on the 1959 in review, perhaps more than any other film did. If I were one-man Oscar-nominating committee, I would give it 7 nominations. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor for Joseph Schildkraut, Best Supporting Actor for Ed Wynn, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Score, and Best Sound Effects Editing. I've got The Diary of Anne Frank as well. So the big question is whether or not Matt has seen The Diary of Anne Frank from director George Stevens.
I can't say even. If I did, it would have been in school, and I don't remember the details. Sorry, Jonathan.
It's fine. I didn't expect you to have seen any of these. So the fact that you've seen, Ben-Hur and 400 Blows, I think is a bonus. Patrick, we had the same number 3.
Yeah, I mean, you're in good company.
Thanks. I know what your top 2 are going to be, I think. So the question is, what order they're going to be in.
Well, let's see. What do you think my number 2 is?
I'm going to say your number 2 is going to be Room at the Top.
Ooh. No, it's not.
So it's Career.
It's Career. It's a tough one. Career, I felt like it was just an honest portrayal of life as someone who wants a career in entertainment. I have a story with Career where I watched it with actors, and they were like, turn the shit off. It's too close to home. I saw how it affected them, and I also enjoyed it, so it gave the film a little bit more weight.
Yeah, Career was my number 7 film of 1959, if we went back that far. So I also liked it as another big surprise of the project that I'm glad you guys liked. I was surprised I liked it as much as I did. I thought it would be sort of a wild card, but you guys both liked it. James named it also one of his favorite films of the project. So it really landed, and I agree that it's great. And it's well-directed, super well-acted. Anthony Franciosa's terrific. Like, really great. And if it weren't for Marlon Brando's performance in Fugitive Kind, it would have been the best of the year. And he did win a Golden Globe for Career. Matt Polis, have you seen Career? It's a pretty random one.
Yeah, but movies that are about the industry usually are, not always, but usually pretty good.
But they can be bad, and this one was not. This one was pretty good. So, Patrick, I'm wondering if you have a guess at what my number 2 would be.
I feel like it has to be something that I didn't watch because I have such great taste.
No, you've seen both my number 2 and my number 1.
I'm not sure. I'm not exactly sure. I'm gonna go back and look. Maybe. Oh yeah. It's got to be North by Northwest.
Nope. My number 2 is a film that I first saw in college, and I'm wondering if Matt Polis was in this class with me. I've loved it ever since. It's a top 100 film for me, in at number 79, and it's called Imitation of Life. A highly controversial film from director Douglas Sirk that I love very, very much. Those who attack this film as being racist and unwoke in its depiction of its friendship between a white woman and a black woman probably haven't watched the film thoroughly. However, if you watch the film, there's no white savior here. There's no question who the real hero is, the real glue to the makeshift family of 2 mothers and 2 daughters trying to navigate the dicey waters in the 1950s for both women and African Americans. And that is Juanita Moore's character of Annie. The film is melodrama of the highest order, soap at its soapiest, but it's the most elegantly and beautifully executed melodrama ever filmed. Few directors use color, framing, and mise-en-scène with as much cinematic effectiveness as Douglas Sirk. Its plot and its acting might be something for daytime television, but Douglas Sirk adds depth and detail through his gorgeous filmmaking techniques. If I were one-man Oscar-nominating committee, I would give it 6 nominations: Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actress for Juanita Moore, Best Costume Design, Best Song, and Best Makeup. And Patrick, I know you also had Juanita Moore as your Best Supporting Actress of 1959.
Yeah, and Best Song.
Trouble of the World.
It was a whole hell of a lot of melodrama. I did not like the daughter of our supporting actress,
Susan Conner.
I didn't like how she was treating her mother, and maybe that was for good reason, but I didn't like how she was acting like she was treating her mother. I didn't buy it. And I also didn't buy that she was African American, but that's just my own.
Understandable.
I know who she is. So
she's the mother of Paul and Chris Weitz, the makers of the American Pie franchise.
Oh, really? I thought that movie was powerful. I did think it was a little sappy. Yeah, I couldn't get over the fact that she was a maid. But black people were maids. I gotta get over that.
It's true. Think about it as a studio making this film. They also had to navigate the dicey waters that we talked about in terms of distribution. There was that weak moment that I hate that they had to do, but I feel like they had to do it, in which, I mean, clearly Sarah Jean's father was white.
Of course.
Annie says he was very light-skinned. Is what she said.
I didn't even pick. I might have gone to the bathroom at that point. If I had heard that, I would have turned off the movie right then.
It was the opening scene at the beach, but
that was just a lie. I mean, she was just lying.
That's possible. I hope that's true.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying about the melodrama. The filmmaking is so good, and that's why I named him the best director of 1959. It's so good and elevates the material so much. Like, it's so inspiring to me the way he uses color and framing and mise-en-scène that I could watch it over and over again. And the plot is interesting to me in spite of the melodramatic execution. To be honest, there's something kind of fun about every time Lana Turner overacts. You know what I mean? There's something kind of campily fun about it. There's that extra element as well. I'm wondering if, Matt, if you remember this from college.
I don't specifically. I like what you're saying about it in terms of the director's hand in it, so I'd like to see it.
And you are warned about the melodrama, but if you can live with that. And I mean,
the most amount of black extras I've ever seen in a 1959 movie at the very end.
Credit for that, yeah. Okay, so it's time for our number one films from 1959, and you probably all guessed what they are by now. So Patrick, I guessed it was number 2, and it looks like, strangely, inexplicably, Room at the Top is your number one film of 1959.
Room at the Top, only because of Simone. Only because of Simone and the fiery female empowerment that she delivered in that film. It was a film that could have came out in the 70s, you know, or the 80s. She was a strong woman who didn't let her sexuality hold her back. She basically was empowered to do all those things, and I thought that was a very, very great role. I would love to see another woman play that same role and crush it.
Check out that film I talked about earlier, White Palace, with Susan Sarandon. Because Susan Sarandon's great in White Palace, one of the best performances of 1990. We argued about Room at the Top a lot. It was also James's, you know, he had career Room at the Top as his 1-2 as well. I am troubled by Room at the Top. First of all, number one thing I think I'm troubled is I think Lawrence Harvey is really bad, and he's the real lead of the film. I hear you're saying about Simone, but the story is Lawrence Harvey's.
His storyline is weak, and his acting is weak. The turn in the middle and 3/4 into the movie was weak, but she saved it. She kept saving this guy. The power of like her silence was deafening in that scene. It was great. It was great.
She didn't save it enough for me. I agree with all those things about those weakness things, and those things were huge for me in terms of the plot. And the camera work was kind of some odd choices. I thought that maybe they shot things a little too close up. We often didn't get a sense of the geography of the space. It was hard for me to get a handle on the wholeness of the world because, you know, they were making it character-driven. That's one thing, but I was... you know, it was unclear to me in some cases where they were, you know, even just like basic storytelling, things like geography and things like that, sort of poorly executed from director Jack Clayton. I don't hate the film. It just wasn't, I've seen it before, and I found it kind of dull and uninteresting, and I think it was risque for the time, and that's, you know, that goes a long way, but I don't love it certainly as much as you do.
All right, let's shit on your number one. What do you got?
And you will. Before Matt Polis, it sounds like you've not seen Room at the Top.
No, I haven't. I'm not.
Oh, I think I know it's your number one. Is it the trial one with the panties?
Anatomy of a Murder? No.
Oh, what is it?
You've already...
North by Northwest, right?
Matt, take it away. Say it.
It's got to be North by Northwest.
North by Northwest, of course,
okay,
is my number one film. It's my number 19 favorite film of all time. Discussed in detail in the very last episode that Maddie P. and Alex did with me. On its surface, North by Northwest is a fun, entertaining, perfect, taut, and suspenseful spy movie thriller. But underneath, it's about a man realizing his true potential once forced to think outside the box that his upbringing and narrow perspective put him in. I knew before we started the project it was going to be the best film of 1959 because it's also one of the best films of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And if I were a one-man nominating committee, it would be nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, Best Score for that amazing score from Bernard Herrmann, and of course, Best Visual Effects, which is something Maddie P. and I talked about a little bit on Thursday night's episode. Patrick, I know that you are not as much of a fan. I talked about you all night the other night on Thursday, by the way, constantly referring to all your questions during the screening. Tell the audience how you feel about North by Northwest.
Again, this is the way I approached the film. I was like, oh, it's a Hitchcock film. I was expecting kind of a Vertigo or something else. And I was like, this is so light. It's so poppy. You know, like as much as I want to hang out with the main character, I didn't put it together with Hitchcock. I didn't think it was thrilling. I thought it was a popcorn. You can watch it and it's great, but I didn't think it was the most thrilling. I thought Tom Dooley was more thrilling than that. But I actually like Tom Dooley, so that's my problem.
Maddie P., didn't I pretty much describe Patrick's reaction to the film exactly like that on Thursday night?
Yeah.
Maddie P., you were leaning more towards me on North by Northwest, as I recall.
Yeah, I thought that was great. I wonder how much of Patrick's reaction is baggage you bring to expecting a Hitchcock film and getting something you didn't expect versus just the movie as a standalone, not knowing what it would be about. Because it seems a lot of your reaction to it was it didn't satisfy your expectations versus You did say it didn't measure up in general, but it seemed like a lot of it had to do with what you thought it would be or wanted it to be.
Yeah, I honestly think it was that. Maybe I would have, if I hadn't known it was a Hitchcock film, I would approach it different. Like, okay, it's Hitchcock. All right, this is going to be something weird, something that I've never seen before. And I felt like I've seen this type of picture before.
Only because they are all copying North by Northwest. Like, North by Northwest is the template.
If you had to give it a genre, what would be the genre that you give North by Northwest?
I'd say a fish out of water spy drama. You put somebody into a spy world that has no idea what they're doing. They find new talents that they didn't know existed.
It's quite a genre.
It's a long genre. Just like the Mila Kunis, Kate McKinnon movie, The Spy Who Dumped Me, from 2 years ago. All right, guys, so this is the end. Thank you guys for participating tonight. Say goodnight to the audience.
Good night.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.